Welcome, Warrior fam.
Yay!
How are y'all doing today? You can't answer
Mhm.
me. You can't answer me. One way audio media. Warriors, we're so happy that we had a chance to connect with an amazing guest today.
Mhm.
Yes, her name is Sarah Bartlett, and she was such a fun, interesting, dynamic guest. And before Abby jumps into her recap about this conversation, let me let you all know a little bit about who Sarah is. Sarah Bartlett is an avid, corny joke teller and a mother of two little fur babies, Jasper and Daisy. Sarah is a Colorado native, attending the Colorado School of Mines, where she received 2 degrees. After a successful career in oil and gas, including more than a decade of leading teams, Sarah realized her true passion is people. In 2020, she founded Potential Energy Consulting, where she partners with individuals and companies to tap into their potential, exceed their goals, and grow. When she's not working, Sarah loves camping, movies, trying new beer, and travel. All right, so Abby, let's hear a little bit of a recap about this convo.
Yeah. I mean, this conversation was just it was incredible. Like I have still so much of what she said just like swirling around in my head and so many takeaways and insights that this was just I mean, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah.
Sarah starts off by sharing how in March 2020, she calls it the Great Reset. And she talks about how in March 2020, she was going through a divorce and she was deciding to change jobs and left her job and also was living alone for the first time. And, there's a lot of anxiety there on top of then the pandemic hits. She shares a lot about how she identified herself was through all of the external things. I'm so and so's wife, we're high school sweethearts, or this is my job and my job title, and how a lot of those identities and labels she had started to change in that time. Since the pandemic, she's really been able to companion herself and step into these moments of discomfort and really get to know herself, who she is, and what her values are so that she can align her job and her life with her values. And that has led her to living a happier life. There is just so many nuggets of wisdom. There is so many great tidbits. I am left with just so much to think about after this conversation. I just really enjoyed this time connecting with Sarah.
Yes, she was incredible. And we know all of you warriors are going to gain so much knowledge and wisdom and a lot of light and lightness and love from her as well. So, warriors, here's the show. Welcome back, Warrior fam.
Yay!
We are so excited that you're here with us again. We are joined today by an amazing guest, Sarah Bartlett. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yay, us too.
Yeah, we're so excited that you're here. So let's just dive right in. Talk to us a little bit about how anxiety shows up in your life.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a story, I guess, of how it kind of came out. So my life was the typical thing that, Americans especially do. I went to college, I got a degree, I got another degree, I had a career, I went to middle management, I built a team. I was married, I bought a house, I did all of that stuff. Well, in 2020, March of 2020, I essentially, what I like to call blow up my life, or what I call when I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic about it, the Great Reset. And March of 2020, I separated from my husband, I moved out of my house, and I quit my job. And P.S., a week later, a pandemic started, the isolation, the lockdown of the pandemic. So I found myself in March of 2020 alone in a house by myself for the first time ever, getting divorced and about to leave my job. I'd given my notice. And so it's a very isolating thing. And when I couldn't go out, I couldn't see my friends, I couldn't travel, I couldn't do so many things, again, because of the pandemic, that for me, it started to show up then as like what did I do with my life?
Wow.
What did I do with my life? Like, how did I get here? Everything is gone. All of these things that I had worked so many years for I just said goodbye. I just said kaput. And so anxiety for me started to show up a lot then with these shoulds. So a term I like to call shoulding all over yourself, where it was, I should have had the career. I should have had the life. I felt guilt for leaving my career. Like I should be working and I should be married and I should own a house instead of be renting. And I should. Like you can say all of these things about what life should be. And I sat here going, well, I was telling myself all of those. And with some help from a really great therapist, started looking instead at what do I actually want to do, be, etc. Because all of these things that I thought I was going to be, I thought I was going to be, a manager, a VP, a director. I thought I was going to continue to be a wife. I was thinking about being a mom. I thought I would be employed, even that word, right? All of those things are things that I wasn't. So then what actually am I? Who am I?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is so much without a pandemic, right? But then there's like that added level of, at the very beginning, we didn't even really understand it. Can I interact with people? Can I be outside with people? And so there's all this transition and all this change. And like your whole foundation of who you were and, what you were doing in life had totally changed. And then on top of that, it's like super extra hard to even just connect with people to help kind of ground you and remind you and support you, because all of a sudden the whole world shut down and we're all afraid of each other, at least for a little bit, until we got more understanding about it. Yeah.
And I'm such an extrovert. I struggled. I struggled to not see people.
Right. Some of the introverts are like, woohoo, finally 2 weeks where I don't have to leave the house, like permission to be myself. Right. For the extroverts, it's like, oh my God, please let me out of the house. Please let me interact with people. I don't care. Like, and so that is, it's a lot. It's a lot. So I have like a few different questions. First of all, I just want to reflect. I love how you were like, oh, the typical American thing, 2 degrees and getting 2 degrees. And so I was like, good job. I only got 1. I know. Like,
I got the 2, but I went to college. Check mark. That's off the list.
Yeah. Right. And you followed all the things that, we're 80s babies. You followed all the things that we were told. Okay, you go to college, you get a degree, you get married, you buy a house, whatever it is, you're going to live a successful life, whatever that is. Right. And then you followed all those things. And then years into it, it's like, oh, wait a second. This isn't what I was taught as a kid. So my first question is, do you feel like you ever had anxiety in your life before March of 2020 and you didn't notice it? Or do you think that it was just like, that was the trigger of all these transitions and all these changes where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm having a lot of anxiety around all this change right now?
Yeah. I think that was one of the periods of the highest anxiety for me, but it definitely was not the only one. But I learned through those activities what anxiety looks like for me. So having gone through that and sort of faced that and confronted it, I was able to then look back on other parts of my life and recognize I was going through similar feelings then. I just didn't know what they were or how to talk about them. So I will say that before this, I would just avoid. I would avoid. When I would have anxiety around something, I would ignore it. I'd be like, oh, it's fine. I would be overactive about I'm going to throw myself into my career because everything will be fine. I don't have to worry about my marriage. I'll worry about my career, or vice versa. Right. And I didn't maybe process it in a way that was sustainable for me.
I mean, you just said something that like gave me this aha moment of like, how many people are just throwing themselves into work because there is a very like a, overworked work addiction culture going on, right? Which I don't think we grew up in the 80s and 90s with that either. Like there's boundaries around work and life. And how many people are experiencing a variety of mental health challenges and issues. And instead of sitting with it and being with it, they just keep diving more and more into work to distract them from their mental health.
Because society says work is how you provide value.
Yeah.
And that's not true, but that's how a lot of us see it. And that's how a lot of us get validation.
Yeah.
I would argue for so many people, you get more good jobs or positive validation from your work than you do your friends and family. Sometimes we take our friends and family for granted that, you know, they know that we love them, but we don't tell them what they do well, or a lot of the same validation you would get at your work. So if you're getting that validation through work, you work.
Yeah. Right.
That's so
Right.
interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't,
Right.
yeah, that's new. That it makes sense, right? That, and when you just said it so articulately, it's like, oh man, whew. It's something I've thought about, but maybe just not in a while, or I haven't had it framed to me in exactly that way. That like work is more validating than our interpersonal relationships sometimes, or more outwardly, like verbally validated was what went through my head, right? Like people are affirming the work that you're doing.
Yeah. Or you finish a big project. You finish a big project, you hand over a deliverable, somebody says, good job, or somebody says, we did it, or let's celebrate, right? And then if you say like, you know, at home, I
Did the
just did my
laundry.
spring cleaning, or I did my laundry, you know, nobody's like, yay, good job.
Right. Right. No, I love that. That is like such a huge aha moment. It's like, right, we get those like dopamine fixes or whatever they are from our job and being recognized or validated or completing something. But at home, it's less like you're never complete with the laundry. You're never complete with spring cleaning. You're never complete with getting oil changes for your car. Right. And so, I mean, that I just love the way you put that. I just want to say like one other thing, and that is I can only imagine how isolating that must be when you're going through a divorce on top of a pandemic, but even before the pandemic, and just feeling like maybe people don't really, I mean, from my own experience, when I went through a breakup, I got a lot of like toxic positivity, and I got of like spiritual bypassing, and I got of like, got a lot of like, things are going to work out. Don't worry about it. And it just made me feel more alone in the grief. And so I'm projecting my thoughts on you, but if you want to just share a little bit about the divorce piece, I'd be curious about your experience.
Yeah, I actually it took me a little while to get to the point where I'm more comfortable talking about my divorce, but now it's the thing that I try to talk about with people. And I try to use the big ugly D word, the word divorce, or say my ex-husband. So to normalize it. So one of the things with going through divorce is there's a lot of shame associated with it. It's still looked as something that's like the taboo, and people say, I'm sorry. And it's like the thing that's bad, right? So there's a lot of shame around going through that experience and that word.
Yeah.
The other thing though, is that getting divorced was a huge catalyst for me to look at more parts of my life than just my career, and more parts of myself than just who I am at work. So I really see my divorce as a catalyst for a lot of me saying, enough is enough. I'm going to be different now. And I'm going to be more aligned with myself now. I'm not going to, I'm not going to be ashamed of it anymore. It took me a while to get to the point where I was like that. But now when I meet someone, for example, and they say, I'm going through a divorce, people usually say it very timidly. They say it shyly. They don't look at you. They look at the ground. And I say, wow, that's really hard. And I'm proud of you. Because you don't want to say I'm sorry, and you don't want to be like totally insensitive and say congratulations when they're like, I didn't want this at all. Right. And some people you can say congratulations because you know enough of their story, and it is a congratulations on a new chapter. But I find I try and lean into it because it was such a catalyst for change. Now, the other thing I'll say is it doesn't have to be a divorce to have the same kickstart, to have that same kick in the ass, to do something different. It's just a big change in your life. So it can be, for what for me was my divorce, for some people could be a breakup. I have a friend of mine who got let go from her job, and that was her catalyst, and she's taking it to so many other things. So it doesn't have to be something like a divorce, but everybody has their catalyst. Mine was my divorce, and I want to talk about divorce so it's less of a taboo subject.
Yeah, I love that.
I mean, I just have full body chills. I have to just the fact that you would turn to someone and say, that is really hard, and I'm so proud of you. Like, as a non-divorced person, I just, who doesn't want to hear that about anything in their life, right? Anything that you're struggling with. It's like, somebody look at me and tell me that you're proud of me, right? Like that's the most beautiful gift you can offer any human being, no matter what they're going through. So I just thank you for saying that. It's just so beautiful.
You're welcome.
It does. It needs to be more normalized. It needs to be, first of all, like there's nothing taboo with divorce. Like I think that probably comes from our Puritan heritage back in the day. And things have changed, right? And then just the being able to see the person and everything they're going through. Like, even, I think I've said this before, but I've had breakups with people I didn't even like, and there was still grief and discomfort around it. Right. So it still is a painful piece. It's still a transition that is worth being acknowledged, because you change after those moments.
You really do. And, there's a reason you were in whatever that relationship was. Right. So there, you talk about that person that you wanted to break up with and you didn't even like them, but there's a reason you got into that relationship. Mm-hmm. And so those positive feelings are at odds with the more uncomfortable ones. So I don't regret my marriage. I will say that I don't regret it. I, in hindsight, would have maybe done things differently when they got hard, now that I know how to do something differently. But I don't regret the choice to marry my husband. I don't regret so many happy memories and years that we had. I don't regret them one bit. I don't get here and say, wish I never did that. Now I'll never get those years of my life back. But it is something that you always have these dual emotions competing. I still have days where I miss him for some reason, or I'm thinking about a time in my life or a memory or photos, nostalgia. Nostalgia is a thing now, right? So flashback to the 90s or these fashion, these early 2000s things that are coming back, the butterfly clips and the bell bottoms and whatever. And I flash back to my point in my life where that was a thing, and I can't associate that with my ex. Mm-hmm. So you're always going to have these reminders. Mm. So can I also do that and have some sorrow and sadness and be like, that's okay to feel both of those things at the same time.
Totally.
Yeah, it's just something we're always trying to say to ourselves, right? It's okay to hold these two dueling emotions, these two big feelings that feel combative, but it's just it's so empowering to hear from anyone that's able to reach the place. And you said it's taken time and now you're getting more comfortable with it, but that you're here admitting that you have those rough spots sometimes, those moments where you miss, it could be the dumbest thing ever, but if it's valid to you, you're curious about it, you're sitting with it and saying to yourself, it's okay, right? It's okay that I'm feeling this way in this moment. So I think that this actually is a great transition to our next question. And in our call, you had talked a little bit about the anxiety of losing your identity. You just said a moment ago in the first couple of questions, surrounding your career, leaving your job, you identified as having this job, you identified as a wife for so many years. So just share with our listeners a little bit more about what that feels like for you and how you've navigated this sense of losing your identity.
Yeah. There's a lot of things where, call it society, call it your brain, call it whatever, you place value in these things that are external, and we all do it. Some people more so than others. Self-proclaimed people pleasers, definitely a lot more than others. I am so-and-so's friend. I am so-and-so's husband or wife. I am employed by this company. But then it's no, who actually are you? What are the things that are from inside of you, not these things that these labels that other people in society have put on you. And I didn't have those. I didn't know those. I used to meet people and you do a fun fact or something. And I'd be I married my high school sweetheart, because that was the interesting thing about me. And I'm so that fun fact about me is about my husband, actually. It's about me and my husband. It's not actually about me and who I am.
Yeah.
So it's all of these labels, it's all of these things that you become, and you learn to identify with those. And speaking of the validation earlier, you get validation for a lot of those other roles. And now I'm saying, but who am I? What are the things that I like? I was in a pandemic. I wasn't doing these things that I would do with my husband, and say, what do I actually want to do? Like, what do I want to do with my weekend? What do I want to do with my time? What kind of books am I actually interested in? Do I really like camping, or did I only like it with him? Turns out I love camping always, even alone. But, asking a lot of those questions, that it was, all of these things that I used to have second guessing and saying, is that actually true to myself and who I am? Or was that a label that I picked up through a friendship, a marriage, a job, or whatever, and I just never dropped? I'll say with my career, I also struggle because I also always used to get called the technical expert. And I hated that. I hated it. Now, I understand why people said it. I was very good at my job. I was very technical. I was very good at portraying it. So people said it to me, but I hated it because it's not what I wanted to be known for. And so that questioning was familiar for me. But now let's turn that outside of the job and into my personal life. Who I am, what are my values? What do I do for fun? What kinds of things do I like to have in the house? Those kinds of questions. I was restarting with everything.
Yeah. It definitely sounds like in that time, it was probably very challenging, right? But the way you spoke about it was so inspiring. I want to journal after this podcast because it really is a valuable reflection of who am I? If I take away the external labels, if I take away, the things that make me unique, but they're connected to something outside of me, who am I? And so I just really appreciate you sharing it, and the way you shared it was just really, I was just awestruck during it. Right. But I want to highlight that, or I want to honor that. I'm sure during that time, it wasn't so beautiful and inspiring and everything. It's kind of like you're dating yourself or getting to know yourself and figuring out who you are again when so much has changed, the rug's pulled out from underneath you. So.
And I just happened to do it during a pandemic. I spent a lot of that time in the several months of lockdown, right? And then it's well, I can't go do things and distract myself or have fun. I literally am facing these things. I'm just sitting in my house figuring this stuff out for myself.
Yeah.
I don't know how I did it, honestly.
Right. It's, it's the bittersweetness of the pandemic. For some people, they had to really sit down and reflect, at some point, at least for those 2 weeks when everything was closed.
Yeah. Wow. When we had talked in our pre-interview call, and I shared with you, I was like, wow, I've been with my husband for 22 years, and I hadn't thought about how deeply interconnected our lives are, right? Still are. And I remember I had a conversation with him after our call, and it was just so interesting because I said, I'm like, I've done that before, with you. I've said things when someone asked me what's something interesting about you, I've said that exact thing about I married my high school sweetheart. And I think it's partially because it's a rare thing, number one, right? And it's rare for people our age, right, to have been with a person or to be with a person for that extension of time. And so it was just an awesome reflection point for me. It was and while I'm still married, hoping to stay married, it was just wow, how often have I just completely left myself in the dust when having a conversation with a person, right? And so it's been a really interesting reflection point for me and for us as a couple. And so it's weird for me to share this with you maybe on the pod, but I'm grateful that you and I had that conversation and are having this conversation now, because it's sort of a window into, like you mentioned before, maybe there were some things you would have changed, in hindsight or in retrospect. And so, but by sharing your story, I know you're gifting something to me, and I'm sure to many of our listeners, about how to take a pause and reflect on how you're communicating, notice the way in which you're leaving yourself in the dust or doing more things that your partner's into potentially. I think that if everyone listening could potentially take this idea and apply it to so many different facets of their life, right? You're talking about work, you're talking about, the pandemic, so many things have made all of us need to stop, get quiet, and pause and reflect. And I just think in such a short time, and as Abby said before, I'm sure it didn't feel beautiful and inspiring to you, like when you were in the weeds with it. But I mean, I'm just looking at your face right now, and there's such a glow to you. You seem to, even though maybe you're not the world's most happiest person. I mean, who is? But you're able to talk about this with some comfort, and hopefully more of that comfort will come from knowing that what you're doing is offering the gift, right, of your story to other people, which is going to help them to hopefully reflect on their own way of being and thinking. So, yeah.
And I really hope that by sharing, I do exactly that.
Yeah.
That people are like, oh, interesting. And can I think about it that way? So that's why, again, coming back to the divorce question, that's why I'm like, I'm divorced.
Yeah.
You have a question, you can ask me about it.
Right. It's so cool. It really is cool because there is so much shame around divorce, and Abby said our Puritan society. That's exactly what I was thinking too. A lot of it has to do with religion and just, misogynistic gender roles from very, very long time ago that, anyway, separate conversation. But I'm excited to talk to people that are excited about who they are and where they are in their journey. And I think that more people need to be out there with their story in spaces they feel safe in anyway. All right. So talk to us a little bit about how anxiety shows up in you physically. How does it manifest in your emotions, in your body, in your behaviors, things like that?
Yeah. So I have what I like to describe like, or what I thought more about it, I describe as like a wave. And so when something comes up and I have a reaction of anxiety to it, or if I have a thought pop up or whatever that is, I get this like flush of like, sometimes I feel like it feels like I can feel my blood just like waving through my body, and I get tingly, and it's just like this hot flash / tingle / flush, and then it recedes. And where I think I struggle the most is when it recedes. Sometimes I recede really far. So I talked about how I had a lot of avoidance techniques before. And so like, I'm someone who I will easily avoid something when it's my own thing. But when it's anxiety with somebody else, I'm someone who fawns. I know that's a term that not as many people are familiar with. There's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And fawn is basically where you go with the flow. You go with what the other person says. Like you're in a group, you're like, I'll just do whatever the group wants, or whatever you want, so-and-so, or, honey, or whatever, I'll just go along with it, even if it's something that's not comfortable for me, that's contradictory to my values. So I find I'll have like these flushes, and that'll be kind of a trigger for something, or sometimes those are more subtle. The more common reaction is I'm fawning, I'm avoiding something. And what I've learned to pick up on is, when do I avoid things? And so I'll find myself avoiding something and being like, what am I actually avoiding? Like, what is it that's bothering me right now? Because I can tell you I'm doing things that are very avoidant. I'm, taking breaks in the middle of a work day to do TikTok because I don't want to do my work. I love TikTok, by the way. I'm doing all sorts of things that I'm literally avoiding something. And so then it's a matter of, what is it? And leaning in and stepping into whatever that uncomfort is. And when you lean in and step into that uncomfort, you can get a little bit more, I get maybe a little bit more of those blood reactions, those body things, those flushes, that anger, that heart palpitation, and the tingling for me, like literally is a wave through my body. But I shove it aside, I avoid like crazy, and then I confront it and get those again.
You just keep sending light bulbs in my brain. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh. Oh my God. Like, I just keep taking all these notes. So when you say fawn, right, I hear that as like people pleasing, right? Like, it's not always like jumping through hoops, doing a song and dance. People pleasing is sometimes something like someone's like, hey, let's go get burgers. And like, you don't really want burgers. But rather than having a conversation of figuring out where to eat, it's like, fine, I'll just go with the flow. Yeah. That's how, like, the ways that it can just creep up in just everyday living, right? Like, it's not always like sacrificing yourself and your well-being, but it's like little bits, like chipping away every time, instead of speaking up or saying what you prefer or having a conversation to collaborate and figure out. It's like no, I'm just going to say yes so that we can just get to the next thing. Right. And
We
so
just
like,
have harmony and like
yes,
avoid the discomfort.
right,
Yeah.
right. And so for me, it was like a light bulb in just all the different ways it can creep up rather than just like dealing with the discomfort. And it probably isn't a big deal. It just kind of like stops the flow for a second or whatever. So I so value that. And then I really also just like how you gave the example of TikTok, because what I have noticed is everyone is way more addicted to their phones since the pandemic. Everyone is struggling with time management. Everyone is struggling with being able to put their phone down. And what are we all avoiding, right? Some of it's addiction. We get fixes by, I do Instagram scrolling, right? But we all, but I love how you're like, what am I avoiding? Right. And it's like, oh, I'm avoiding work, or and just those moments, like, I just, in my mind, the light bulb was like, oh, when I pick up my phone and I hit the app, I can ask myself in that moment, what am I avoiding? Like, it's such a simple tool, hard to remember, but simple. Right.
And it feels different. So
yes.
I have times where I will pick up my phone and I will doom scroll, and it's like this numb doom scroll. And like I said, I love TikTok, right? And then I have other times where I'm like, I'm taking my wind down me time and I'm going to choose to do it with this. And I feel more joy from it, right?
Yes.
So these things feel differently. And so not to say that you can't enjoy Instagram or whatever you're using as your mechanism for avoidance is something you also enjoy, but it does feel different when you're doing it. There's like a numbing and avoiding. It's not like something I'm choosing to bring myself joy right now.
Right. I love it.
I know. Yes. Yeah. Mind blown emoji. Wow. I think so much of what you shared is deeply relatable. I'm sure I know for us, but I'm sure to so many of our listeners, and just the numbing of the harshness of our world, right? Mm-hmm. Can feel really, really awful and also supportive. And so having the intention behind, why am I hitting into this app? Why am I choosing to be on the phone instead of doing something else? And having that moment to pause, right, is so much of what Abby and I are always doing for ourselves as mindfulness teachers, right? And what we're trying to offer to kids and the younger generation, and certainly the people that are listening to this podcast. And so much of what it sounds like you're doing is offering yourself so much space for curiosity, so much space for asking yourself questions so you can get a better grasp on your why. Why am I doing this? Do I want to be doing this? So I think it's deeply relatable.
Well, and if I can, I have to throw in a plug for Abby, because there's been a few times where she's asked me a question. I'm like, damn it.
Abby's the queen of questions.
Damn it. I remember I was battling with something and she goes, what are you afraid of on the other side of this decision? And I was like, motherfucker.
Yes. That's really funny also, just because right before you threw that in, I wanted to say like it's so powerful to ask questions, right? It really as opposed to what I should do, how I should feel. It's like asking, why am I avoiding this? What's on the other side of what's the fear on the other side? And that opens us up to be really curious with our experience versus telling ourselves what we should do. Right. And so I love the asking and the curiosity of our behaviors and our narratives and our identities and our labels and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Plug Abby all you want. I mean, because, she really does. Like, she was my mentor for kids yoga and mindfulness. And whenever I had a question for her, she basically did that annoying thing where she turned it around and asked me another question. And I was like, bitch, you're my mentor. Like, could you freaking help me with something? Right. But at the end of the day, it was like, okay, fuck, like I need to come up with this on my own. I need to figure this out. And then, I would speak on it. I would brain dump and work through it. Right. And then she would say, well, now, right. Like now what's going on? What do you notice a shift in what you think, in what you wanted to say versus what you think you were supposed to say?
What spilled out of your mouth. Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes when you're processing those things and thinking it, and I'm a verbal processor, I do better when I can say it out loud. Sometimes when you're thinking through some of this stuff and then like something comes out of your mouth, or for me, it's my mouth. Some people it's in their journal or in their head or whatever. And I'm like, whoa, I just said that. Like, I wasn't expecting that to come out. And it's like those aha moments just, they do come out at you.
Yeah. But you have to give the space and you have to have the questions, and we have to like get out of this thought of like, there's a right way to do it or someone else has the answers. And like, yes, sometimes there's an answer here and there, but usually, you know, when it comes to ourselves, like the best thing people can do is ask us a question.
We're really good at self-gaslighting, right?
Yeah.
And so, right, when somebody, right, it's seriously. And so when somebody else is insistent on you answer the question, even if it takes you a really long time, and then you wind up, like you said, Sarah, so beautifully, it's like, whoa, I just said that, or I just had that thought, or I just wrote it down. And it's like, okay. And that came from nowhere else but my own mind. And it's like, we're always trying to do what other people want us to do. We're trying to be the best, air quotes, that, you know, we can be for everyone else. And really what we're missing is just having the self-awareness and trust, right? That wasn't taught to us really, or at least not the three of us from an early age, right? Yeah. Like we're told pretty young, like, you have to ask for those expectations. You have to conform. You have to fall in line, literally, right?
By
And
the way,
so,
you're
like,
also going to change the world because you can do anything, and you will succeed, and you will achieve, and you will whatever.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Right.
It's so confusing.
The pressure.
It's like these messages for kids, for all people, but for kids, like, no wonder why we're all so messed up. Anyway,
we haven't succeeded in saving the world yet. That's why we have all that existential dread. Our teachers were wrong.
Okay. So talk to us a little bit about some of your like go-to strategies for coping with your anxiety, whether it be in the moment or if you're like planning for something specific and like, that anxiety may arise, leading up to something. What are some of the things that tend to help you?
Yeah. I'm one of those people that like when something really hard is at me, I'm actually weirdly calm under pressure. I think that's more of my fawn though. Like I'm just like, I turn into this weird go with the flow thing. But anxiety does still creep up quite a bit. And sometimes a lot of it'll creep up right before I turn that switch into this like weird calm that I still can't always explain. But what we talked about earlier, I have to talk it out. So I'm definitely a verbal processor. When something, and living by myself, like sometimes I'll talk to the dogs or sometimes I will talk to myself, but I call a lot of friends, say, do you have a few minutes for me to just like talk at you for us to get what's in my brain off of it? So I'm one of those people that needs to talk it out. I do a lot better through talking it out. But when I'm in the moment, very anxious, I draw into what I'm feeling in my body. And again, usually is this weird calm, but I find some way to like momentarily calm myself. So when you get that like rush of whatever, and I'm like, okay, I need to keep my face straight. Like I'm in a conversation with somebody, I need to keep my face straight. I need to whatever. I'll be like, actually even right now, like I'm picking my cuticles. I have a really bad habit with my cuticles. Like, can I feel them? But something where I like touch myself or I notice something or that kind of draws me in the moment. And then it's that idea of how can I measuredly step into this discomfort? Because I will just run away and avoid it if I can. Like my instinct is to run away and to avoid it. So, if I found myself running away, then I talk it out and I figure out what's going on, and then I'll step into some sort of discomfort with some friends. And so when I'm feeling like a wave, like for me, anxiety shows up. Sometimes it's short term, sometimes it's long term. If I have like a wave where I feel very off, I need to go walk. I need to just like leave. Walking my dogs every day is some of my like reset myself zen. Going on a hike in the woods, taking a stroll around the block. Like if I get really stuck in my head and I do need to think something out, talk it out, like I'll talk to myself as I walk around the block. Like that's, I think, the thing. So I verbally process, I walk. I also love podcasts. I have noticed that podcasts have been one of the things that have been one of my coping mechanisms. When I live by myself, I would get a lot of anxiety around I'm alone and unworthy and like nobody's ever going to love me and I'm going to be like a hermit forever. And weirdly, and especially in a pandemic when you like literally can't go interact with people, playing a podcast makes you feel surprisingly not lonely.
Oh,
Makes me feel that way, at least. It's like, oh, I have somebody in the room to talk to. And
yes.
when it's more conversational, like this type of podcast, I feel like I'm part of a conversation. Like we could just be sitting around a table, a campfire, a couch, a coffee table, whatever that is, and kicking back and having this conversation. And I could be right there in the room with these people. So it is something that makes one of my biggest triggers is that feeling of loneliness. And it's something that really helps me with that.
Wow. Wow. I mean, first of all, that is just so beautiful, right? Because I think that sometimes when people are doing podcasts, they have no idea, right? Like who's listening, and just like it helps people feel connected. It can help with that loneliness, it can be a form of self-care, and be part of a community is just beautiful. Like that is amazing.
Yeah.
Like like way to go podcasters, right?
Yeah.
Um and I also just want to say that, you said that part of it is stepping into the discomfort. And I just want to say it's so freaking brave to do that, right? It's so easy to avoid discomfort. It's so easy to ignore it, even if it's like sitting on your shoulders weighing you down, right? It's so easy to get it distracted with the next thing, and to just like pause and acknowledge it and step towards it to see what it has to get, like information it has, is an act of bravery.
Don't get me wrong, me and lots of people, I need like sometimes a shove
Yeah.
to get there.
Yes.
Right? It's not an easy thing to do it. And sometimes it
Yeah.
takes me quite a lot of like prep and pump, and I can do this. I know why I'm doing this. I'm going to do this. And sometimes I need somebody to shove me.
Yes. Yeah. Shove you into the discomfort, but you're still open and willing,
Yes.
So I love that. And then there was one other thing that I lost now. But that you talk to yourself. There's when I'm having a really hard time with stuff, I like look at the mirror and have a conversation with me. So I love that you shared that piece, because sometimes you just have to talk it out. And if there's no one to talk to, it's like just have a conversation with yourself. You're probably the best person to talk to anyway,
Yeah, you'll find that a thought is not complete coherent, maybe makes sense the same way when it's just rumbling around in your head. But when you try to verbalize it, it takes a new form.
Yeah.
It's why it's sometimes really hard to say what's in your head.
Yeah. It's true. It sounds like a powerful practice. Yeah. Sounds like a powerful practice. I love the podcast part. I devour so many podcasts too, that like, I didn't realize what a like important part of my pandemic life podcasts were too. I wasn't listening to them, I don't think, because of like isolation or like feeling like the need to hear people's voices, but I just found that it's become the most palatable way for me to receive information. And I'm not an auditory learner at all, but something about conversational podcasts feels very digestible to me. I struggle more with, and usually I'm the read write person, but there's something about podcasts that have felt so supportive to me these last couple of years. I think it's just because of things like doom scrolling were ruining my life. Things like watching cable news was ruining my life. There were so many things that we're being inundated with all the time. And so it's like, there's so much control you have over podcasts, and there's so many podcasts about the same topic that you could literally say, I'm interested in X and let me find the one that works for me. We live in a time that's filled with so much of that, and that's a miracle. And at the same time, you're like, I wish it was a little bit less stuff to choose from, but I'm really grateful because at least then I have some choices. I'm not like stuck with the same channel or the same podcast to get information, or the same voices or whatever. There's like so much variety, and
there's so many choices sometimes that I get overwhelmed. I'm like, how do I know the good one?
Yeah.
And I will say I have FOMO, and I have, did I make the right choice anxiety all the time. Like analysis paralysis is my thing. And so it's like, how do you pick? But we even talked about in a conversation with somebody, or, these aha moments, or this discussion you had with your husband after talking to me, right? I find that listening to somebody talk about something that I've been thinking about, I might hear something like that discussion and be like, oh, I think I want to do that. And it's like, if I just have these things around, something will pop out, and it's that thing that connects me that like makes me want to do something different or interesting or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
when you devour podcast content about something like, you get those like things from it without having to spend the time doing a lot of other stuff, because you can do a podcast when you're doing something else.
Yes.
I love doing them in the shower and when I'm cooking.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Cooking, walking, all the things. Yeah. So it's a great medium, everyone. And I know you're listening to us on this podcast. So hopefully that means you're also into podcast warriors. Okay. So in our call, you talked about how you were finally like designing this life on your own terms. Like for the first time, you were truly asking yourself about what you want out of life. And you've touched on this a few times throughout. So just kind of describe for our listeners what that process feels like for you and its impact on your mental health.
Yeah. So I think to answer this question, I need to start with the result. So one of the things for me, for example, my career, like I said, I had a long career that was very technical. I was very good at my job. I was very successful. I rose the ranks. I did all those things, but something just wasn't quite connecting. And it's a lot of technical work that I did. It was, air quality for oil and gas. It's very technical. You can't see what's emitted into the air, but how can I measure it, control it, reduce it, things like that. And I'm good at it. Sure, I could do it. I could produce a product and get that validation we talked about earlier, but something just wasn't landing for me. And so as the more I started to think about this, it's when I manage my teams, when I work with people, when I do this certain type of role on a project where I'm not the technical person, I'm not bringing my technical skills, but I'm bringing something else. That's something that I recognize made me feel a lot more satisfaction. And so I started designing life around that. And that's where I started looking at, what might that look like? And I'd worked with people who did like organizational change and that type of consulting. And then I stumbled upon coaching, and coaching was something that just felt really right. And when I talked to some of my coworkers, especially like those who reported to me, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this coaching certification and do like more work as a coach. And they're like, oh, that fits. I'm like, thank you. Thank you for saying something fits. And it's not this technical thing that didn't last. Well, since then, some of the things that I've learned are, when you are doing something that aligns more closely with some of your values, you are happier. This is positive psychology in a nutshell. There's so much that can happen with positive psychology, but it's one of those fundamentals is when you're doing something that aligns with your core values. So the way to describe it is like inside out. What are the things that I value, that I like, that I whatever? And so for me, it's this connection with people. And then how can I live those? How can I integrate those into my life? And you become a lot more of a happier life. So, I mean, since choosing to do that coaching, I've learned about like what's the science and the psychology and things behind that. But that's really what I had to do. And then, on that personal level, it's the same thing. I can go do all sorts of things, but what are the ones that I actually enjoy? Like, do I actually enjoy this? Not do I enjoy doing this with this other person? And if that's the case, do I like more my interaction with said person or that activity? And if it's the interaction with said person, then think about interactions with other people. So it's that sort of process to think about it. Yeah. And some things didn't change. Some things I've had a thing that I kept. Like, I love dumb jokes. I love them. I tell them all the time. I don't care that people think they're silly. It's a thing that I just get so much joy and satisfaction out of. But I dropped some of the other stuff, and I'm not even remembering what some of that is now. So how can I start to ask those questions and live what I actually want to do? Society makes that hard sometimes, but I can do it. I can do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love that you threw that society part at the end, right? Because it's not just like, know your values and align yourself to your values and life is joyful. It's like, no, society makes certain things hard, but I really love that. It's like really figuring out who you are, what lights you up, and how to bring those things more into your life so that you're living more based on your values. It's just like, it sounds empowering, right? And it's not like a snap your fingers, change overnight thing, but it's like a process. It's a process to figure out your values. Some of us don't really know, like what all the things that are our values. And then actively taking the steps to start living those.
Exactly.
It's so powerful. It's so empowering. I love that. Yeah.
I love that you added the part just now, Abby, that like you have to, not everyone knows their values, right?
Yeah.
So like that's a really big step in trying to live more aligned with your values. First, you have to kind of like get clear on your vision for what you believe, right? Who you are to your core, what you believe, what's things you're not willing to bend on, things that are just so intrinsic to what you know to be true for yourself. And you also just said, both of you, right, that it is a process.
Mm-hmm.
No such thing as, quick overnight fixes, including for your anxiety. So
yeah. And it's the undoing of what society told us. It's the undoing of like, oh yeah, you're going to save the world, right? Maybe that's not my value, right? Like maybe my value isn't even that, right? And so it's like sometimes we don't even know our values because we still have a lot of undoing work to do before we're even like, okay, wait, what are the values that come from me, right? So
yeah. And you can look at people, that person who wants to save the world, and be like, good for you.
Yeah.
Like I can admire the shit out of you and you are doing great things. That's just not for me.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with you that it isn't for you.
Zero wrong.
Right.
But that's what makes us all beautiful, is that I need that person. Like as a humanity, we need that person and me and the person who has a different worldview. Like we need all of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We need all of us. That's so beautiful. All right. So if you could speak to a younger version of you, maybe it's the version that was right, in January of 2020, maybe it's childhood Sarah, any time period, or just more generally, if you could speak to a previous version of yourself and offer yourself one piece of advice, what would you say?
What's funny is I was just thinking about this. My answer to this question has been the same for a few years. And it's interesting to me that it's the same for a different reason. It's do what you want, not what you love, not what you're good at. I think there's a difference. Do what you love, not what you're good at. And, again, it goes back to my answer to that last question. We spend so much time just doing what we're good at. We get validation, we do that, whatever, but it's not always the thing that really brings that deep down joy.
So good.
It's awesome if they're the same thing, but they're not always the same thing.
Right.
They can become the same thing. The more you do what you love, you will become better at it.
That's true. Yeah. Oof. Woo.
Yeah.
Oh, body
that gave me chills. Yeah. And like a tinkle in my belly.
Not a tinkle.
It gave me belly sensations.
There you go. A tingle, I think, is the word.
Tingle. There we go.
Not a tinkle.
I was saying twinkle and tingle together, and I got tinkle. I don't know.
Tinkle like that too. I hear tinkle and I think like you peed your pants.
Me too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay.
I didn't get a tinkle in my belly.
Let's get. That's good. That's really good. Okay. So final question before we get into some lightning round fun. What does being an anxiety warrior mean to you?
Yeah, I love this question. I've been thinking about this one. So I can't help but get the image of like 90s Hercules and Xena. Like, remember like Kevin Sorbo and Lucy Lawless, like in my head. And so what it is it's true embodiment of, like, when you say an anxiety warrior, it's like a warrior around that. And so I think of somebody who is a warrior, and here's some of the things about them. They have battle scars. You can see some of them and you can't see some of them. And even if I'm just talking about like scars on your body, like some of them are under your clothes, it's in your armpit, it's things that like people don't see, right? So everybody has these things that you see and you can't see, but how can I stand here and say, here's who I am, battle scars and all. And by the way, my duty is to protect others, address anxiety. So how do I do that? Well, one, I know how to protect myself from it. And I show up in my battle gear, and I show up with my battle scars, and I share with other people so that they can also protect themselves. It's not my responsibility to protect everybody, but it is my responsibility to throw it out into the world and to talk about anxiety and to talk about tips and tricks and to be there when somebody asks for a little bit of help, to essentially combat it. And so anxiety, it's as a society, how can we all band together to make this more normal, to make it have less control, so that we're the ones driving our lives instead of this thing called anxiety.
Mm.
And I'm going to show up armor and battle scars and all of it right there.
Yes.
Exactly.
We didn't talk about twinkles, but I gotta give you just like a fuck ton of twinkles right now.
Have you and I talked about twinkles?
No,
we've never. Oh, wow. Okay.
What? These are twinkle fingers, sparkle and shine. This just means like, wow, you just blew our minds.
My heart sees your heart. You're like,
yeah, just all so much feeling right now with that answer.
Yeah.
Wow. Beautiful. It always just touches me in such a way when we ask folks this question and we get such different responses, each one of them more beautiful than the last. And so just thank you so much. That was amazing.
Yeah. You're very welcome.
But it is time to play now. Anxiety, and this was a light conversation for the most part, but like still talking about anxiety, talking about mental health stuff, divorce, all the change in career, it can feel stressful to us sometimes and to our listeners, I'm sure. So like we like to play at the end of every episode or towards the end of every episode with a little bit of a lightning round. So are you ready for lightning round?
I'm so ready.
So
that's some great special effects
right? Okay, thank you so much. Okay. Thank you. That was the external validation that I needed.
I feel good now.
I know. See, sometimes we can make a case for external validation sometimes, right? We're saying, you got the power within, but it feels good to hear it from the outside sometimes. So thank you. All right. So we're going to go back and forth and just ask you a fun, silly, get to know Sarah type question. You do not need to answer at lightning speed. You can take a pause, take a breath. Think about your answer. There's no rush here. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. Abby, you want
to go first?
You want me to go first?
No, it doesn't matter. You want to go?
Sure.
Okay,
I'll go first.
You go. All right.
Okay. I'm going to start with an easy one. Where is your favorite place in the world and why?
Oh, wow. So many places have like different emotions that invokes that it's like, how do I choose my favorite one? So I'm going to say a generality of my favorite one. Because at first I was like thinking of all these glorious mountain places where I maybe went to process things that had like profound realizations. But my favorite place in the world is around a small table with my friends or family. And so it's something where there's the people that I love nearby and everybody is giving and receiving love and attention to each other, and everybody's having a great time and they feel safe and comfortable and can talk about light stuff and hard stuff. That's my favorite place.
So good.
Yes.
What a deep answer.
I know. I'm like, my bed, the beach.
I was just thinking of my bed too. I'm like, it's my bed. It's my bed. It's my favorite place in the world. Of course it is, Abby.
I mean, at first my brain went to like, I love Belgium. And then I was like, wait, but what about Iceland? And then I was like, this hike I did when I chose to get a divorce, maybe that one. But then I'm like, no. No, I think
it's around a table. I love that. Oh my God. I'm taking your favorite place. It's mine too.
You're welcome.
Okay. I'm going to I think this might be an easy one. I think if you had to live one day of your life as an animal, what animal would you be and what would you do for that day as that animal?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, my brain immediately went to, do I want to fly or do I want to swim? I think I want to be an otter. I know we talked about otters.
Yes.
Which is weird because it's not like my spirit animal or some of these things I said. But the reason I want to be an otter is they have a very connected sense of family and like unit. And so I always thought that was adorable, and it would feel good to be just an otter in those things. But have you ever seen those videos of otters that like stack cups or play with rocks or whatever? I'm just like, that looks just, to have that be something that brings you such joy is something I want to experience.
I love
it. Can I go swim around, be silly, do my thing, and play with stacking cups?
Yes.
I love it.
Amazing.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. If you were an item of clothing, what would you be?
I don't have a reason. I'm just gonna say the first thing that came to my head, a sports bra.
All right.
Wow. That's a really specific one. Okay.
I don't know why that was the first thing that came to my head.
I like it.
You're very supportive.
It's very supportive. It's maybe also one of my favorite pieces of clothing because the thing that makes me most comfortable.
Yes.
I have that support.
I love it. Okay. So you said that you like telling jokes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a favorite go-to joke?
I do.
Okay.
What do you call fake spaghetti?
What?
Impasta. And for those who are listening, what you can't see is I can't tell that joke without making a really dumb face.
It was so good. Say it again.
Impasta.
Impasta.
It made me think of the Lion King.
Yes, me too.
Impasta.
Yep, exactly.
Impasta.
I like it. Fake pasta. Wait, did you say fake spaghetti or fake pasta?
Fake spaghetti. What do you call fake spaghetti?
That makes it, that makes it better. Oh
Impasta.
my gosh. I love it. Impasta. I'm gonna tell that one to my 5-year-old niece and she will love it.
Oh, when you're ready for the next one, I got more. Like after you tell her that one, you're like, I need a new joke for my niece. I got you.
Oh, okay, great. Okay. I'm seriously going to be coming to you about that. That's awesome. Okay. I prefer talking to someone that like is a true, like, what would you call it? Like a savant, like somebody who really is into it, like passionate about jokes instead of just going on to Google and finding some dumb jokes there. So I will be coming to you for the silly fun jokes.
And she's going to give you the delivery too, like it's
that's
not
right.
like reading it on a screen. You're going to get the whole thing.
Like what face to make when I say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
And like make the sound like Mufasa, right? It's like, yeah.
Perfect. Okay. All right. My final question. You talked about camping a couple of times. So if you could go camping for the week or the weekend with any celebrity, who would you want to camp with?
Keanu Reeves.
Oh man, that was a fast one.
That was fast.
I've thought about this question. No, I thought about just like the general celebrity question. And Keanu Reeves has been at the top of my list for recently because that man is just fascinating.
He really is.
Like, yeah, I want to know what he thinks and how he lives. And like, what is it like to just make dinner on a campfire with Keanu Reeves?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I have a really solid last lightning round question.
Okay.
You and Keanu Reeves are camping. You're sitting around the campfire. You've just eaten. What song do you sing together?
What song do we sing?
I knew it. I was like, here comes the song question.
What song do we sing?
Oh, wait. And then you have to sing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like just like a line or two. What song would you do?
Not the whole thing.
Sitting by the campfire, singing a song.
You just taught Keanu how to light a proper campfire.
Yeah.
Because he's all Hollywood. He doesn't know. That was my terrible, like, California accent.
Or he's like Neo and he's like, whatever, I'm plugged into the Matrix or whatever he says in that movie. No, I like, man, this one's tough. Okay, so I'm just gonna go with the first song that popped into my head, and it's one of my favorite songs.
Yeah.
Total Eclipse of the Heart.
Can you give us a line?
Once upon a time I was falling in love. Now I'm only falling apart. Nothing I can do. Total eclipse of the heart.
Woo!
I think that's one of Keanu's favorites too. So
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna Google that and find we're gonna find a link somewhere that says Keanu is obsessed with that song and also loves camping.
When you go camping with him, please get that on video for us.
Okay, I will.
Yes, because I won't be camping. I would say invite us, but that sounds terrible. I'd love to meet Keanu Reeves, but camping sounds like so.
Oh, it's great.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah. This has been so inspiring and so much fun. And I just feel like I've learned so much from you and really appreciate your time.
Thanks. I really loved it. This was great.
Awesome. All right. So before we let you go, we love to ask all of our guests if they have a win of the week to share with us.
Yeah. I do.
Any win, big or small. Okay, let's have it.
I went to visit my in-laws in Salt Lake City this weekend and hanging out with my niece and nephew. Hugs from kids where they're just like so excited to see you are the best.
Yeah.
They're the best.
They are.
I love it.
Huge wins.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Love it. That's awesome. All right. So tell our listeners where they can connect with you.
Yeah. You know, one of the best places to connect with me is LinkedIn. Boy, I should really find out what I am on there. But LinkedIn. I don't do a whole lot on Facebook or some of those other things, but LinkedIn, you can, even though I don't do a lot, find me on TikTok at Hugs and High Fives. That's another story. Or honestly, you can shoot me an email. My email is hey@sarahAliceLLC.com. And I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. And so people are looking for some coaching, right? They can reach out.
Want to talk about anything we talked about today? Want to become less shameful about the big old D word? I'm ready.
Yes.
Love it.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Everyone who needs a coach or is going through something, go talk to Sarah. All right. Amazing. Thank you so much again for being with us. We're so grateful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Woo, warriors. Oh my gosh. Obsessed with this conversation.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So many nuggets.
So many.
Wisdom and light bulbs and goodness and
oh my God. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I feel like a broken record every time we have a conversation with another guest and I'm like, this was amazing. And it's like, it's because we are just the luckiest podcasters on earth and cool people that are smart and interesting and have fascinating stories and lives are willing to talk to us about their anxiety.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah. Sarah. Wow. So just like a little backstory about me and Sarah. Sarah and I were in the same online coaching program that we signed up for during the pandemic. And so for me, I had done coaching 10 years ago, like through a program. And I was like, well, let me just do a refresher. Right. And a friend of mine had gone through this program. So I was like, all right, let me do this. And, it was like 25 people and it's all through Zoom and you don't really, connect with anyone. And that's how I met Sarah and Anthony. And I am an introvert and I have social anxiety, but with those two, with each of them, I was like, that's my person. And so, we've now been friends for a few years now, like since that. And I just feel really, I don't know what the word is, amazed or I just think it's so cool how you can sign up for some random class and come out with some awesome friends.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Yeah. I think it's awesome that the pandemic sucks and it's sucked now since day one.
Yeah.
But I just love that there are things that people have gotten from it that have been life-changing. Right. And so I know I have that for myself too, and new spaces and communities and relationships with new people that I formerly never knew and probably would never know. So I love that y'all are connected by that.
Yeah. And like she lives here. Like not everyone lived in Colorado. Like no one lives in Colorado, but Sarah and like a couple others, but not really.
And she was one of your people.
And she was one
happens to live here.
I was like, I like that person. Yes. And then we became friends. So anyway, that was just like,
that was awesome.
Sad story. What's a takeaway you have from our conversation today?
Oh man, it's going to be so hard to narrow these down because as we said off the top, it's like there was just so many beautiful moments in this chat. I think the first thing that keeps popping out to my mind to say is the way that Sarah talks about normalizing and validating experiences. And she referred to divorce as the big D more than once. And I very much appreciate someone who is willing, right, to be that person,
right,
to be out in the world as a coach or just as a human being and work on destigmatizing and releasing people from the shame that they may feel for going through something that for many of them, maybe not all, was necessary or important and a milestone that they needed to get through or need to get through in order to get to the rest of their lives. And I loved hearing her talk about all the ways that she's used positive psychology and, just brain dumping and verbal processing. I know these are like separate takeaways, but I just felt like the through line of all of it in this takeaway is that she has a great grasp, it seems, on who she is and who she wants to be now as a person in the world. Whereas before it seemed like maybe she wasn't living 100% for herself and for herself first, you know?
Right. I'm with you on the, like, that wasn't going to be my takeaway until I just listened to you, but on the, just like the normalizing and talking about like everything, right? Like, but divorce is one of them. And what I was thinking about during her conversation was that divorce hasn't had time to be normalized and talked about, because up until like the 70s, right, women couldn't get their own credit cards. Women couldn't get their, like, they couldn't get a house, right? Like, women couldn't open up bank accounts, like, in the 70s, right? And so of course women weren't normalizing divorce back then. Of course women weren't, as many women weren't having divorces, right? And so, you know, part of my takeaway, which it wasn't until this moment, was just really that, like, this is still kind of new in the normalizing, because for so long women were trapped where they couldn't even divorce and like live a life in society. And so it's like, this still has to be more and more talked about and normalized, and you know, learning how to companion people during this rather than avoiding the conversations around what it's like to go through a divorce.
And women were the ones that also fielded most of the blame for divorce too, and the shame. Right. So yeah, there's that. I think my other main takeaway is how, I guess I could just deeply resonate with the numbness that comes along sometimes with feeling anxiety, and or the opposite of that, which is just like hyper emotions. And so like those two like parallel ways of feeling or being that she kind of described, those dueling emotions. And I loved the way she talked about the way she copes, right? Like stepping into those strategies, taking herself for walks, talking to herself, you know, getting her thoughts out in that way. You know, taking her dog for a walk. And so much about podcasting. Like, so it's more about just like, I felt very connected to her story, because it a lot of those same things are things that I wind up doing in my own life. And so I just for some reason, this part of every conversation we have previously always stands out to me, just like how each of us finds a thing that works and goes with it. And, you know, she expressed so much self-curiosity too. I mean, I just find that these strategies are super tangible for a lot of folks. And so I enjoyed hearing her validate my own experience, you know, through her own lens. And I mean, podcasts are the shit, like not just because we host one, but like it's just such a great way of hearing new ideas and thoughts and perspectives and engaging in conversations. And I love it as a tool for coping with anxiety or loneliness or, you know, whatever someone might be experiencing.
Right. No, I loved that whole conversation. For me, it was like, oh, I've never heard of like podcasting as self-care. And so I was like, you know, and I mean, there are so many takeaways. There's so many different light bulbs. There was like the questioning your identities, like you don't have to go through a big event like a divorce or moving or a pandemic to question who you are and how you identify yourself. You know, there was just so many things that she said. Like, I'm very excited to re-listen to this again. Like the reflection piece of like, why am I avoiding these things? I really loved like sitting with that to start to implement it into like my daily life of like, oh, by doing this, what am I avoiding? But like my final takeaway, it was so small, right? That she said something, but it really stuck with me. And she was sharing about the nostalgia of things that came up when she was thinking about her her marriage, right? And she said, I don't regret anything. And to me, that really is such a powerful, it sounds like a very healing moment to reflect on something and it didn't turn out the way you wanted. It didn't turn out the way you hoped or you expected. And yet you can look back on it and not have regrets. You can still appreciate the beautiful parts. You can acknowledge the hurtful, painful parts. but there's no regret in the journey that led you to where you are now. And so for me, that was like a really huge takeaway. Was that she chooses to look at all of that and not have regrets. It's powerful.
Yes. Yeah, agreed. This was such an amazing chat. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being a guest on our show. We love you, warriors. We're so grateful that we get to be with you and that you're here with us in community, listening to us and our fellow warriors share about their story. If you would like to connect with us, you can jump on over to Instagram. We're at Anxiety Warriors Podcast, or you can shoot us an email at anxietywarriorspodcast@gmail.com. Shout out your wins of the week. If you have topic ideas for us, or if you think you'd be an awesome fit as a guest on our show, let's get it on the calendar. Let's hear from you and help you tell your story. Please take 2 seconds, smash that 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you tune in. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. All of our episodes are uploaded over there. And smash the, threadless link that we have in our show notes. We have some awesome merch, Anxiety Warrior swag that you can pick up for yourself or the warriors in your life over there. And we would love for you to support us in that way. And also you look really good and just have some cool new stuff to use and wear and all the things.
Enjoy. Totally.
Enjoy. Yes. Thank you, warriors.
Yes. Thank you all so much for going on this journey with us. We're so grateful we get to do this with you all.
Till next time.